Hello, my name is Yuro and welcome to another Baldur's Gate 3 build video. In today's video, I'd like to show you the Red Prince build, which was inspired by one of the characters from the Divinity Original Sin 2 game, which is also made by Larian Studios. The reason I wanted to do this was because I wanted to see if it would be a fun idea to recreate or attempt to recreate the characters from that game in Baldur's Gate 3. Now, keep in mind though that, of course, it's a different game, so it's not the same with character customization, and it's a different universe, so the races are slightly different. So most of the characters will probably look like Teemu versions of themselves, so keep that in mind. I hope it's not too distracting. But anyway, so for our character, when you recruit the Red Prince, he tells you that he is a fighter or natural born fighter. And we're going to try to attempt to recreate that here, where we're going to go with, as a fighter, primarily Battle Master, and we're going to try to go what I thought would be a great sort of weapon for him is a longsword with a shield. So we're going to go as a dueling type character. But let's get into the character creation. So for our race, of course, we're going as a Dragonborn, since, well, that's the closest thing we have to a lizard race that is similar to the one from the Divinity Original Sin. And we're going, of course, as a Red Dragonborn, since the Red Prince is, well, red, and he can breathe fire as well, like the Dragonborn from this game. We're also gaining the Draconic Ancestry, so we are resistant to fire damage, which is quite handy, as it is probably the most common damage type in the game. For our class, of course, we're going to go as a fighter. This will be a pure 12 levels fighter character. As a fighter, we gain the Second Wind, which is a 1d10 plus our fighter level heal. And then for the fighting style, we're going to go with dueling, since we are going to be we're going to be using a longsword in our one hand. So we'll make this work with any weapon that you hold in one hand. You just have to make sure that it is not two-handed versatile, right? So if you hold a spear with two hands, it won't work, but with one hand, it should work. Same thing with the longsword. Then for abilities, we're going to go kind of with the standard layout of the fighter abilities course. So 17 strength, 14 dexterity, 16 constitution, 10 wisdom. 17 strength, of course, our main way of dealing damage, and also it's going to give us great mobility. 14 dexterity, just so we can get +2 from the armor class if you use medium armor. And also we gain a little bit of extra initiative. 16 constitution to help us with health, so we are quite tanky. And then 10 wisdom to help us with wisdom saving throws, so mental saving throws. Then for the skill proficiencies, I mentioned earlier, or probably maybe I didn't mention it, but anyway, as a background, I went with a noble, since of course the Red Prince is a noble, and as a noble you gain history proficiency from your background, and you gain persuasion proficiency from your background. So this is pretty good. History is pretty bad, but hey, what can we do? But persuasion is quite good if this is your main phase of the party. Now, for the rest of your skills, you do have acrobatics and athletics. These are also quite decent. Then we have animal handling and medicine. Animal handling and survival. Animal handling is quite bad. Same thing with survival, unless you want to roll full survival checks, and because you don't need to actually see the buried cache. You can just use the shovel action on the general area of the cache, and you can dig it out. But in my personal preference, I usually like to have one character with survival proficiency. And then insight and perception are probably the two best ones here. So my suggestion would be either go with both insight and perception if this is your main phase of the party. If not, you could choose one of these two and then one of these two as well. This would be both good choices. Alright, so level 2, we gain our action surge, and we can move on to level 3. At level 3, we get our subclass, and here we're going to go with the Battle Master. This is going to give us the Battle Master maneuvers. Now, for the maneuvers, I was just taking repos, since we would consider the Red Prince to be a great duelist. Repos would be something that he would probably want to use, since if an enemy misses an melee attack against him, he would be able to retaliate with as a reaction to deal a powerful attack that deals initial 1d8 bonus weapon damage to that enemy if it hits. Then for the other two choices that we have here, my suggestion would be probably the two best other ones would be disarming attack and trip attack. Disarming attack is great if you disarm the enemy. You can take their weapon off the ground, and then they will be most likely disarmed for the entire combat unless they have a backup weapon like a ranged weapon. And then trip attack is great because if you trip an enemy, then you have advantage against them if you are attacking them from within, I believe, 10 feet. So if you're 10 feet or close to them, you get advantage with melee attack actions. At level 4, we gain our first feat, and here we're going to go with ability improvement +2 into strength. This is going to help us with our combat prowess and also with our mobility, since we'll be able to jump a little bit further. Now, at this point, or level 5, we can deal with Ontieth to gain ability point improvement into strength or any other one. Though for the Red Prince, it's not necessary because later on, we're going to be getting the Heavy Armor Master, which does give us +1 into strength. So the Unfatal Hair is not necessary for him. So we're gonna go with ability movement +2. At level 5, we gain our extra attack, and we can move on to level 6. At level 6, we gain our second feat, and here my suggestion will be going with Savage Attacker. This is going to help you increase your damage on average. So what this does is when making melee weapon attacks, you roll your damage die twice and use the highest result. So basically, like I said, you roll higher damage on average. At level 7, we unlock additional Battle Master maneuvers, and here my suggestion would be a few of these. For example, you could take Precision Attack if you want to use it to increase your accuracy. Menacing Attack is great, and also the Goading Attack. Maneuvering Attack is decent as well. Feigning Attack can be useful if you have your bonus action, and with this character you won't have too many bonus actions to use, so you can also take this. We'll get an additional 2 maneuvers later on, so nothing to worry about there. But anyway, for now we're gonna go with Goading Attack and Menacing Attack. What Goading Attack does, if the enemy fails to save, they're goaded and they're forced to attack you on their next turn. So it's great for basically making enemies focus you down instead of your allies. Then Menacing Attack is quite nice because if you frighten the target, they cannot move and have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks, which is also a nice form of crowd control. At level 8, we unlock our third feat, and here you have a choice. Either you take Heavy Armor Master or Alert. I'm gonna go with Alert. Reason I would go with Alert is if when you play through the Divinity Original Sin 2, you do get a encounter with an assassin, and when you talk to the Red Prince afterwards, it's not a big spoiler, by the way, it's quite literally at the beginning of the game. When you talk to him afterwards, he's basically unfazed because he says he survived quite a lot of those. So I think Alert is quite fitting there because, well, he probably wouldn't be surprised by anything at that point. Well, maybe he would be from this world if he somehow went from the Divinity Original Sin universe and came to the D&D universe, right? But anyway, we're going with Alert. At level 9, we unlock the Indomitable trait. What this does is basically, whenever we fail a saving throw, we can roll again and use the new result instead. So this can sometimes save you from a failed saving throw. At level 10, our superiority die gets improved from 1d8 to 1d10, which is pretty good. And we also gain 2 additional maneuvers. Now here, again, you have a choice between the ones mentioned earlier. So Maneuvering Attack is decent. Distracting Attack, I wouldn't suggest because it's only for 1 attack roll. Evasive Movement as well, it can be nice because you impose disadvantage on melee attacks against you for a round. Feigning Attack, again, decent if you use your bonus actions and you gain advantage on 1 attack. So you can only use this for 1 attack. It's nice if you kind of want to secure a kill on a low HP enemy with this. But what I'm going to take is the Pushing Attack and the Maneuvering Attack. Reason being, Maneuvering Attack is nice because when you use this, you can use Force Maneuver on an ally, which increases their movement speed by 50%, and they don't provoke opportunity attacks. So this is great for your squishier allies like wizards, sorcerers, or even bards, and let's say not druids, but clerics and so on. Clerics if you don't have medium armor and so on, but yeah, primarily sorcerers, wizards, and non-armor wearing warlocks. And then lastly, Pushing Attack is great because you can push your targets 50 feet away, you can push them off of cliffs, or you can push them away from your allies as well. So there is that. At level 11, we unlock our improved extra attack, and we can move on to level 12. And finally, at level 12, we unlock our 4th and last feat, and here we're going with Heavy Armor Master with Heavy Armor Master. This, what it does, increases our strength by 1 to a maximum of 20, so we'll have maxed out strength for the feats. And then all incoming damage reduced from non-magical attacks also decreases by 3 while wearing heavy armor. So basically slashing, bludgeoning, piercing, that's non-magical, you take 3 less damage from this. I should also mention that in Act 2 and Act 3 you can increase your strength further. In Act 2 from the Blood Merchant you get the Potion of Everlasting Vigor, which increases your strength by 2 to up to 22 in the end game. And then lastly from the Mirror of Loss in Act 3 you can increase it by another 2 to up to 24. So the Red Prince will be doing quite a lot of damage, and he'll be quite accurate with his melee attacks as well. Alright, so that is it for the levels. I'll now see you in the equipment section. Alright, so here we are in the equipment section, so let's start with our helmet. Here we have the Helm of Baldur. The helmet heals you for 2 hit points at the beginning of every turn. We also gain +1 to armor class and saving throws. We can't be stunned, and we can't attackers can't land critical hits on the wearer. So this is absolutely amazing helmet. The stun immunity might be bugged and it might not work at the making of this video, but I think it's probably going to get patched with the next patch where we get the new subclasses, so keep that in mind. This is otherwise an absolutely amazing helmet to have, and it's actually understandable considering the encounter you have to beat to get it, and the fact that it's quite lit in the game and it's actually very hidden. So an absolutely amazing piece of equipment right there, and it's quite fitting for the Red Prince, of course, since he's nobility, he would probably want the best stuff, right? For the alternative, I was using the Holy Lance Helm. Creatures who miss their attack rolls against the wearer must make a dexterity saving throw or take 1d4 radiant damage and constitution +1 to saving throws. So this is helmet right there. For the cloak, I went with the Cape of the Red Prince. Now, this cape you can get only if you own the DLC for Baldur's Gate 3, which is basically filled with cosmetic items that are a throwback to Divinity Original Sin 2. So it is not necessary. I've been using this mainly because of, well, it's his item, so I decided to go with that. But otherwise, for the alternatives that you would have use from or use for is, for example, the Cloak of Displacement. Basically what this does, it grants you the effects of Blur at the beginning of your turn, where enemies have disadvantage on attack rolls against you. And finally, of course, the Cloak Protection, armor class is +1, which is always great to have. For the armor, we're going with the armor persistence. All incoming damage is reduced by 2, you gain resistance and blade ward, and we also have disadvantage on stealth checks. Now, we don't care about that, we're not stealthing around. Resistance to blade ward is amazing. Blade ward halves all of the damage from bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing. That is not magical. So on top of heavy armor master, reducing it by 3, this reduces it by half, and then of course magical plate reduces it by another 2, although this reduces all damage by 2, which is pretty good. Resistance just gives you +1d4 to your saving throws, which is quite nice. Then for the earlier game alternatives, I've been using the Adamantine Splint armor. All incoming damage is reduced by 2. When a melee attack hits you, the attack is sent reeling for 3 turns. Basically, after that, when you have those 3 turns of reeling, they have a penalty of -3 for attack rolls for every turn remaining. If they attack you once and they miss, the reeling effect basically goes away. And also attackers can't land critical hits on the wearer, which is quite nice effect as well. For the gloves, I went with the Legacy of the Masters. You gain a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls with your weapon. So extra damage and extra accuracy, always good to have. For the early game alternative, I've been using the gloves of the Growling Underdog. When the wearer gains advantage on melee attack rolls while surrounded by 2 or more foes, the radius for this is actually quite big, so you will get this bonus quite often. So really good gloves you get quite early in the game. And keep in mind, they're not considered as armor, so you can wear this, for example, on characters that don't have medium armor or heavy armor proficiency or light armor proficiency. So for example, wizards can have this as well, which is quite interesting. Then for the late game alternative, you could use the Gauntlets of the War Master. Targets have disadvantage on saving throws against your maneuver and weapon actions and attack +1. So these gloves are great on Red Prince as well, considering we are a battle master and we basically all of these maneuvers, the enemies will have disadvantage against them, which is pretty good. For the boots, we're going with the Boots of Persistence. We gain freedom of movement and long strider, and dexterity saving throws +1. Freedom of movement is great because we cannot be paralyzed or restrained, and difficult terrain doesn't reduce our movement speed. And long strider, of course, just grants us extra 10 feet of movement. Then for the early game alternatives, I was using the Silver Sea shoes, which give you jumping distance increased by 5 feet and acrobatics +1. And then we have, of course, as always, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. You can be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and you can't slip on grease or ice. And you gain 1 misty step once per short rest, so a total of 3 of them per long rest. For the amulet, we're going with the Amulet of Misty Step. Amulet of Misty Step, same as the boots of the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, they give you 1 misstep once per short rest, so again 3 per long rest. I decided to go with this mainly for mobility, since if we need to get to somebody that's quite far away from us, if we can jump to them, these are great. If you don't find you have issues with mobility, and great choices would be Amulet of the Harpers or the Fae Semblance Amulet, which give you advantage on Wisdom saving throws. The difference is Amulet of Harpers on top of Wisdom saving throws gives you 1 shield per long rest as a reaction. And then Fae Semblance Amulet gives you Charisma and Intelligence Wisdom saving throws, advantage on those on top of the Wisdom. So you can choose between these two. Both are quite good. Amulet of the Harpers you gain in Act 2, and then Fae Semblance Amulet is in Act 3. For our rings, I've been going with the Ring of Jumping to further increase our jumping distance. This gives you basically enhanced leap once per short rest as a bonus action, so you can get that for your mobility. And I've also been using the Ring of Protection, armor class savers +1. Now, since Red Prince is a quite simple build, we don't really need some wild or special rings for him. Then for alternatives, I also went with the Crusher's Ring for extra 10 feet of movement, and then Acoustic Band for extra acid damage with every weapon attack. So yeah, the rings, you can go wild. You can, if you have some other preference, you can pick those, as yeah, there isn't really any special ring needs for the Red Prince. Now for our weapons, I went with the Voss's Silver Sword. This weapon grants 1d4 bonus to damage attack rolls against the tanky, aberrations, fiends, elementals, weapon enchantment +2, and we gain 1 Wrathful Smite per short rest. And we have standard longsword weapon actions. This is actually a quite nice longsword, especially in the late game, especially for sort of the last stretch of the game, because you will fight a lot of aberrations there. So it's a pretty nice sword. It's kind of hidden because you have to pickpocket it from the Kithrak Voss. There's maybe like 1 or 2 opportunities for you to do it. So yeah, if you miss them, you kind of can't get this otherwise. For the alternatives, I have here the Larethian's Wrath, which is a decent longsword. It is a finesse weapon, so this can be used on other characters that are not strength based. The only difference between this and a normal longsword is you gain the Razor Gale, which is a cone attack that strikes all enemies in the area in front of you. We also have then, of course, the Falar Alluve. Basically, same thing as the Larethian's Wrath. It's a finesse longsword, but the only difference is it gives you performance +1 and it gives you Falar Alluve Melody. Singing a Shriek. Most popular one is the Shriek because it deals 1d8 extra thunder damage to enemies and gives them penalty on saving throws. Singing is the opposite. It gives your allies bonus to attack rolls and saving throws of 1d4. But yeah, like I said, the most popular attack, or not attack, but the action from this is the Shriek. Then we have the Adamantine Longsword, a pretty good longsword actually, because it ignores resistances to slashing damage. So it's a quite powerful one. You will always deal your maximum damage with this, and if you attack objects with this, it is always a critical hit. So a decent little longsword there. Late game alternative, you could also use the Sword of the Emperor. This weapon deals additional 1d4 damage against shapeshifters and polymorphed creatures, and the wielder has a +2 bonus to spell saving throws, enchantment +2. So also a quite decent late game sword, something probably Red Prince would also want to take since it's considered as a Sword of the Emperor, right? Then for our shield, I went with the Viconia's Walking Fortress. When a foe hits you with a melee weapon attack, you can use your reaction and deal 2d4 force damage and knock it prone unless they succeed at their saving throw. So basically a upgraded version of the Shield Bash. Then we also get Spell Guard. You have advantage on saving throws against spells, and spell attacks against you have disadvantage. So we are basically going to be hard to hit with spell attacks. We also get the Reflective Shell. A protective shield envelops you. It reflects any projectile targeting you and back to their point of origin. So kind of like a missile reflection type of a ability. And we also gain Warding Bond once per long rest, which is actually quite nice because we can use this on some of the squishier members of the party. Then for the alternatives, there is the Shield of Shielding. Basically, it has the standard shield bash where you knock enemies prone if they fail saving throw after they hit you with a melee attack, and we also gain a shield once per long rest. Pretty decent shield there. And then lastly, we have the Sentinel Shield. You gain +3 to initiative and attack roll, not attack rolls, initiative and advantage on perception ability checks. So a pretty good one for extra initiative, that you ensure that you're not towards the tail end of the initiative, but more towards the head end, so towards the beginning. Then for a weapon, I went with the Hunting Shortbow. You have advantage against monstrosity type enemies, and we gain 1 Hunter's Mark per long rest. This is useful because we can increase our damage slightly with this once per long rest if we need to. Mainly we want this because of the advantage against monstrosity type enemies, which you will meet quite a few of them throughout the entire game. For the alternatives, we have the Bow Awareness. This is useful in the early game and you can get additional initiative. Then the Gandrel's Aspiration, the same reason we would want this as Hunting Shortbow, since we get advantage against monstrosity type enemies. And then lastly, Hellrider Longbow for even additional initiative and advantage of perception ability checks. But if you decide to use the Hellrider Longbow and the Sentinel Shield, you have a +6 plus, well, double advantage of perception won't do anything, just one will take effect. And then lastly, for our elixir, I've been usually running the Elixir of Colossus. It basically increases us in size, gives us advantage on strength saving throws and checks, and we did an additional 1d4 weapon damage. Alright, so that is it for the equipment section. I'll now see you in the combat showcase. Alright, so here we are, the Flaming Fist barracks for yet another showcase. Now before combat started, I did not apply any buffs, so we can just get straight into the action. So combat with the Red Prince is quite straightforward. You just approach your enemies and you start attacking them. So let's see if we can knock one of these guys prone. We unfortunately do not, because he has proficiency in strength saving throws, but we could probably goad him, since I doubt he has proficiency in wisdom saving throws, which he does not. And then we can use a little bit of a Wrathful Smite on top of it. Maybe we manage to wipe him out. We do not, but that's fine. Now let's take a look at our damage and some of the spell save DC rolls. So the Wrathful Smite from the sword actually does scale with your spellcasting modifier. Since the default spellcasting modifier is intelligence, we have a -1. Even though we have 10 wisdom, it should be a 0, but again, the default one is intelligence. Otherwise, if you're a druid or a, let's say, a paladin, it's going to be wisdom or charisma. But again, if you're not a spellcaster, your base one will be intelligence. So we have 11 because of the -1. For the damage, it's overall pretty good. So if you look at the rerolls, first time we rolled a 1, then we rolled a 5, and then we got a 8 from the weapon enchantment and the strength modifier. We got a +2 from the armor enchantment from the gloves. Excuse me. And we got a 2 from the dueling, which is our fighting style. So 17, quite decent. It could have been a little bit higher, but it could have been up to 20, I believe. We got an 8. Then we got a 3 from the Wasa Silver Sword bonus psychic damage, and a 6 from the psychic damage that you get from the Wrathful Smite. Then, if we take a look at the Battlemaster maneuver, for all of the maneuvers, the base DC, unless of course it doesn't have a DC, is 18. So it's quite high. I don't believe you can increase or decrease this. I think it's either scaling with your strength or maybe your dexterity, or it just has a sort of a flat spell save DC that just that scales up with your level. I would have to do testing to check that if I want to be sure. Or there is probably maybe even an answer on that somewhere on the internet. But anyway, it's quite high, so it's a pretty good even without the gauntlets of the War Master. Then for the damage, of course, the standard 1d4, which we rolled the maximum this time. And then if you look here, we rolled the 5 again with the reroll. We rolled a 3 and then a 5, plus 8, plus 9 from the what do you call it, the superiority die. So first time we rolled an 8, then we go 9. So we rolled a high regardless. And then of course +2 and +2 from dueling armor enchantment, so 26. So pretty good damage all around, I would say. It's not as high, of course, as with, for example, Great Weapon Master and a Great Weapon, but still rather comparable damage. And then we can, I guess, take this guy out with a normal attack, and we could try and go this guy. we actually missed, so there's that. We could then try to frighten him. Wrathful Smite is also a wisdom spell save, like wisdom modifier is used for the saving throw, so he failed that. But yeah, that is it for the build. I hope you enjoyed. I would appreciate it if you leave a like and subscribe for more Baldur's Gate 3 content, and I'll see you in the next one.